Thanks. Thanks for having us here at Startup Village. The place where Zeta Alpha got started about 5 years ago. Thanks also for the Google crew whose main show this is, who have us as a kind of warming up act. My name is Jakub Zavrel. I'm the founder and CEO of Zeta Alpha, and I'm here with Dinos.
Hey everyone, my name is Dinos. I do AI research in IR and NLP here at Zeta Alpha, and today we're presenting our monthly roundup of news in AI research and developments.
And normally we take 60 minutes, so we're going to do a speed run and try to get it into 45 minutes. So let's dive right into it. We have lots of news, product releases, big tech events, hardware news, research papers, startups and investments, and gossip, right?
Yeah, there's always some gossip and drama going on.
And we'll try to keep the gossip minimal, but it's always there. In news, yesterday, in fact, NVIDIA became the second most valuable company in the world, based on the huge revenue growth that they have shown in the recent quarter. In the last quarter, their revenue grew from 10 billion a year ago to 26 billion this preceding quarter. That's astonishing. And that's, of course, all of our money going to them. Who here is paying the NVIDIA tax? Raise your hand. Yeah, they're doing very well. And another breaking news was announced yesterday. So we've all seen Sora, right? Yeah. And we were eagerly waiting for us to get our hands on it. And Google also recently announced some exciting video generation applications, but it was in fact Kling from China, which had the first mover advantage. They launched a consumer-facing video, text-to-video generation now.
Was Kling on your radar before this?
I have never heard about them either, but the demos that they have on their site look pretty high quality. So diving into hardware news, I think the biggest, can we make this control go away? Let's try. Yeah, one of the biggest kind of things which didn't really get registered on everybody's radar was from Microsoft's Build conference, where they secretly announced the end of the Wintel era. Basically, they launched this new series of PC or new architecture for PCs, which no longer has Intel inside. It could maybe in the future have Intel inside, but the big winner of this is Qualcomm with their Snapdragon processors, who is now going to be in, I think, the new sort of competitor to Macs, fully AI-enabled laptops.
Yeah, and of course, since you have this new neural engine, you load a lot of applications that make use of it, such as, I think, what they announced to always record or have screenshots of what you're doing.
So yeah, it's a recall application, which basically will, I think, in some kind of vector database, store embeddings of every action and every event that you did on your PC. Quite privacy sensitive. I think they're going to get some pushback on that. Basically, yeah, I think they're going to be running a lot of AI applications at the edge device on these neural processors. So click forward. In startup news, I don't know if that's actually a startup, but there's a lot of big mega funding rounds. Elon Musk recently, last week, I think, announced that he found 6 billion from various large investors to finance his xAI venture. And he immediately took that money, I think, and shipped it to NVIDIA, right? No, he shipped it to Tesla because he stole Tesla's GPUs, but that's a longer story.
And I think we haven't seen that many companies that raise 6 billion from the get-go, almost. I think it's up there with OpenAI.
Yeah. Well, Wayve, the London-based self-driving startup, end-to-end self-driving software, raised 1 billion, and also Scale AI raised 1 billion, so pretty big rounds there. European machine translation champion DeepL raised very respectable 300 million for their high quality machine translation applications. A little bit more speculative, I think, is AI music firm Suno, which raised 125 million to power their go-to-market.
And I think they're already giving some of that away because there was I signed up for it when it was all in the news, and now they're giving away money to people who create interesting songs with their products. So kind of.
I think they're going to soon give it away to the music publishers because they're going to sue them massively. I think they might have trained on 1 or 2 copyrighted songs. So
it's always fun in the legal space of AI.
One startup which does not carry a lot of risk yet is the recently founded startup called H, which is started in Paris by a bunch of ex-DeepMind research scientists, formerly known as Holistic. They decided with their deep knowledge of search engine optimization to call the company Esh, as the French say. And I think I tried to find some stuff on it on Google, but it's very hard to search for H, let me tell you. But they seem to be like an all-star team and a lot of interest in their models, which I think are going to be a little bit more around action-oriented models, which actually do stuff in existing business applications. And then Mistral is, of course, the other big Paris-based startup, which already raised a lot of money and also delivered a lot of pretty good models to open source and closed source. And interestingly, they just signed a partnership with SAP, not a small software company. So they're doing well. In fact, SAP invested previously in both Anthropic, Cohere, and Alpha. But now they're going to use Mistral. Who knows what that brings?
Well, you always need to have some diversity in Europe, not just AlphaFold and also Mistral.
Exactly. They also need to go to the French market and have the backing of the French politician. All right, so in what used to be startups, but now already part of big tech, a lot of stuff happening at OpenAI. The major sort of business event is going to take place next week at Apple's developers conference, where there's rumors, well, there's actually almost confirmed rumors that there's a deal between OpenAI and Apple about, I guess, who knows?
What could it be? Maybe a better version of Siri?
Siri 2.0 on your watch, maybe. Yeah, that's kind of the rumor about next week. And it has been said that it also has consolidated some Altman's power at OpenAI by striking this deal. Sure, it's a good deal. But there's been a lot of drama. So do you want to give a quick roundup in 30 seconds?
30 seconds. Well, I think what left the biggest impression on people's mind was Ilya finally announcing that he left OpenAI. He was kind of in the...
Although nobody was really in doubt that it would eventually happen, right?
I think he finally escaped from the dungeon he was locked up with his thoughts, but he straight up announced that he left the company, and soon after, a lot of people from the super alignment team followed.
Jan Leike,
who also a few days after announced he would be joining Anthropic.
Well, not only did he announce he would leave and then join Anthropic, he also actually published quite a lengthy criticism of how OpenAI was not actually being serious about alignment or safety research, right?
Yeah, there was this super alignment grant and team who were supposed to have some compute allocated, but in his thread, he goes into quite some details that it's not as forward thinking as people might think about OpenAI. And there was also like people jumping on the drama and saying there are other things about OpenAI that make it not so easy for people to say things that are kind of troublesome with them from within the company, and people have also left.
Two other juicy bits from this gossip is that Helen Toner, the former board member, in an interview made the statement that the board of OpenAI learned about ChatGPT on Twitter. It was not told them internally. And another thing which kind of flew under the radar is also that Evan Morikawa, the head of their engineering, the team that actually was responsible for taking ChatGPT in production, also left to a new greener pastures. Google had Google I/O, a lot of AI announcements. It was essentially an all AI show, right?
I think they even joked about it, how many times AI was mentioned in pretty much every minute of the.
Did anybody count?
I think it was over the hundreds.
Right. So we have some very exciting speakers from Google later on in this afternoon. So we're going to leave most of the talking about Google products to them. But just wanted to mention VO, a new text-to-video generator, and Imagine 3, a new text-to-image generator. Kind of researchy still, Project Astra. Right?
Yeah, I don't think there were too many details about it, but the demo was definitely very convincing. Kind of a response also for
multimodal inputs, voice and video and direct interaction on your mobile phone. Very cool assistant. In my view, the most impressive announcement was actually on the hardware side with the 6th generation TPUs, which show a 4.7 increase in compute performance over the 5th generation TPUs. So NVIDIA, maybe some competition. Let's hope so. And last but not least, AI search overviews were launched. Not to everybody's pleasure, right? There was a lot of
and also not to everybody's availability, because I think it's still not available in Europe, but people from the US already had a go at it and found some cases where maybe it should not be taken as
retrieval augmented generation can be vulnerable if you just prompt the LLMs on any material that's in your search engine.
I think effectively you're just giving access to someone who has access to the internet, but no filters on what is right or wrong. So
yeah, some people felt the product release was rushed a bit, but they're persevering. Right before Google I/O, though, OpenAI kind of stole the show on multimodal assistants because they launched their GPT-4o, and O stands for Omni, so omni-modal, right?
I think something like that.
And it was a really impressive demo, right? And the model is available, actually.
It was a collection of demos, both from people from OpenAI pre-recorded or live during the keynote that they gave about the model, which basically handles any modality as a token and not just having separate.
It's the first truly multimodal model, right? Like Gemini was already really multimodal. Now GPT-4 Vision was kind of multimodal.
But I think that was done with some tricks on the encoder side. But also, you say this is available, but not the full-fledged model.
Not the app, right? But it's available as an API.
It is, but I think only the text generation apart from it and image inputs. But for example, you still cannot have multimodal audio in or out.
Right.
I think also relates to this criticism about you can do a lot of stuff with voice sampling, and it's still a kind of in a deep fake era where we have to figure this out first before it's.
Yeah, but we do count this under model releases and not product announcements because the model actually is quite good, right? So we didn't get GPT-5, but I think this is kind of what was training in the last year or so.
It has definitely been in the works for more than a year. I guess all of the different architectural changes kind of were brought back to it to be competitive, or all the tricks they learned about all the data collected. But I think that they still haven't showed all the cards yet.
Yeah, I think we'll come to the benchmarking a little bit when we discuss the overall situation in large language model land. There was a lot of other model releases also at the Google I/O. Google announced Gemini Flash, a faster and more performant model. Gemini Pro got an upgrade. I think you can see that in the chart with the light blue and dark blue bars on a lot of tasks. Pretty serious improvement for Gemini 1.5 Pro with its very large context window. and also the open source model Gemma, and the multimodal model Gemma got an upgrade. Pretty cool set of releases there. But there's a bunch of other models also out there. On the multimodal side, what used to be called Blip from Salesforce is now called, rebranded as XGen Multimodal. That's also a pretty strong multimodal model. And what else do we have?
We have a model that was kind of very hidden during the time it was released, which is Falcon 2. I think they came out in 2 different versions, claiming they outperform Llama 3, but I guess this is all about the benchmark you're referring to. Just yesterday, we had Qwen 2, which came with a very permissive Apache 2 license.
Where's Qwen 2? I don't see it.
It's the left side, yeah.
Yeah.
On the benchmarks, it looks really good. Every model they released on a different range of parameter counts. Everything up until, but not including the 70 billion model, is Apache licensed. But again, they went the more modern route of custom license for their strongest and best model out there.
So scanning very quickly, it seems to be convincingly better than Llama 3 70 billion, right?
Yeah, that's the benchmark numbers. I think since it only came out yesterday, people have to kind of vibe test and see how it actually performs in real situations. So I don't think it's in the LMSys leaderboard yet.
And another noteworthy model is a code LLM from Mistral, Contextual.
And this one is not Apache license. I think it's the first one that they say they want to keep as a kind of a business advantage.
Yeah. Wait, this is not animating very well here. So if you look at the leaderboards, LMSys leaderboards, there's a bit of leaderboard spamming going on with so many different versions of the GPT-4 model. It's hard to see the forest through the trees. But it's clear from the ELO rating that GPT-4 Omni is now the top of the leaderboard, and I think that's not true on this other leaderboard that you see. But let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So the concept of the LMSys leaderboard is people just vote on different outputs from 2 competing models without knowing which is which, and that's how you get the ELO. Meanwhile, Scale AI came out with this private leaderboard, which is called SEAL. And this is basically a collection of curated data sets that they develop in-house and then benchmark models on their own basis. So they don't let other people do it or spam the leaderboard with new model releases. So they very carefully curate models and data sets that are used.
I'm still curious why they have the opposite ranking for GPT-4 Turbo and 4.0, but...
Well, in this case, I think it's only for coding. So this on the left, we see the overall.
Oh, it's only for coding.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not quite as a wide range because you can't have that many data sets and like very free text generation or scientific or code generation. But I think for coding, at least, I think this is what also people found on their own uses. So 4.0 is quite faster and probably a smaller model. So there's probably some trade-off on how well it performs.
So I think above all these shows that when was Claude 3 Opus the top of the leaderboard? Was about a month ago, right?
No,
6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it can go very fast. On the vector search and embedding side, which is of course a bit closer to what we do at Zeta Alpha, there's also a very strong race for the top position on the MTAP leaderboard. So I think right now there's 3 new models. One from NVIDIA called NV-Embed, which we're actually going to mention in the paper section. Link-based tuning of Mistral and a independently constructed model from Voyage. Other notable releases in the embedding space are also a re-ranking model from Voyage and a multimodal model from Nomic.
And from Gina, which both
and
came.
Gina also multimodal, right?
Both came in the last week, so I don't know if they had any insights on each other, but there's a lot of growth in this space. Well, we didn't have that, I think, in 2023.
But both not open source, I think. But NV-Embed is open, at least.
I think both of them are.
They are open?
Yeah.
Cool.
Because Nomic is very pro open source, I would be very surprised of this.
All right. If we move from there to kind of more the AI code space, still related to embeddings, there's a new version of sentence transformers. Yay, it took a while. What are the main features where it's distinguishing itself?
I think what they try to go with this release is having a lot of features so people can just use this on their production kind of pipelines and not have to worry about not missing out on the latest cool stuff like grad cache or multi-GPU training.
Or these kind of
new losses.
vector quantization stuff, Matryoshka embeddings. It supports all that. And I thought one of the most interesting new features was actually multi-GPU training, since we're now getting into this like 7 billion Mistral model fine-tuning era, but doesn't seem to work very well.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, they don't natively support LoRa tuning yet, so maybe this is a missing piece that should be covered soon.
3.1 coming soon. A couple of other interesting new software releases. YOLO, the classic computer vision program, has a new version, version 10, which is supposed to be about 50% faster. What else do we have? An interesting Mamba-based package for working with tabular data called Membular, a AI LLM-based Scrapy, which automates web crawling and web interpretation. And what is this mini CPM?
I think this is a model that is kind of competing with GPT-4V. So they have taken Llama 3 and done some tricks to allow it to process vision.
Give it a vision tower.
And there's a lot of emphasis on the size and performance, so it can run also local devices. And finally, there's this code repository that I found. This is also focusing a lot on this personal AI that runs on your device and is your digital twin that accesses your data or
your open source Copilot on your Copilot PC, maybe. Interesting announcement in robotics. There was a bit quiet this month in robotics, except that Unitree, the sort of the DJI drone, but then in normal robotics from China, announced a humanoid robot for $16,000. That's a pretty good price point.
And I have to say that the whole structure and how it looks is very similar to the
Boston Dynamics Atlas 2, right?
But I don't think it could have happened that fast because they both released kind of on a similar time scale.
The video looks really cool. We're not going to show it here, but check it out on YouTube. The video looks very convincing. You can fold it up and then take it under your arm like a suitcase. In self-driving, big news was that Tesla is going to roll it out in China, but that might be delayed a little bit because of the recent spat between Jan LeCun and Elon Musk. Some Tesla engineers are now feverishly working to reverse engineer the full self-driving cars to take out all the convolutional networks. So that's for the AI news. A lot has happened in this month. For those of you who don't know who Zeta Alpha, what we do, so we follow this news through our platform where we aggregate all the AI research papers, code, blogs, and news for AI researchers, but we also do knowledge discovery and knowledge organization for R&D organizations and high-tech companies more in general, also on their private data. So our discovery platform allows you to discover content through neural embeddings, through RAG with LLMs, and organize your projects into personalized collection, take notes, share with colleagues, annotate documents, reading notes, and get recommendations. So check it out, www.zetaalpha.com. And we also use the platform, ingesting all the recent publications daily from archive, from conferences, from Hugging Face and many other sources. And because everything is embedded in this neural space, we can also very easily visualize it. So this is the map of the research literature for June. Pretty diverse still, pretty large cluster in LLMs and multimodal vision language models. So Dinos, how do we kind of derive the top 10 list from that?
Yeah, so the list, so the visualization you saw was basically also taking into consideration the popularity of the papers. So
like social media mentions.
Exactly. And based on that, we kind of scout through that and with some personal influence, select the papers that are most innovative or interesting or relevant to us. and also based on the impact that we believe they're going to have in the future. So with that, we kind of came up with a top 10 list, which is very hard to do.
It's always very subjective. So this is our idea of papers that you really should know about. If you're a generalist, of course, in your very own special area, just tag papers in Zeta Alpha, and you'll get updated on what's most relevant for you there. So how are we with time? We still have 15 minutes roughly. So we're gonna cover a bunch of these papers until we run out of time, starting with AlphaFold. Came out exactly a month ago. A Nature paper, of course. Demis Hassabis does not do publications less than in Nature. So it's a successor to AlphaFold 2, which was already very impressive in terms of using deep learning to predict protein structures. And AlphaFold 3 really extends that approach, well, in accuracy. It has a very modern diffusion-based architecture capable of not only doing proteins, but many other biomolecules like nucleic acid compounds and ligands, and also predicting their interaction, basically complexes of multiple. So it can look at for example, a drug candidate and how it interacts with a particular protein. It has a lot greater accuracy on these interactions, on protein nucleic acid interactions, and also antibody-antigen prediction interactions. It's not open source, not exactly. It is available for research use, but only through a service called AlphaFold Server, which is available for non-commercial use. So the second paper in our selection is this, well, it's no longer the leader of the MTAP leaderboard, right? It's just been snatched away by Link recently, but it's very similar. And it stands for a class of fine-tuned MTAP dominating Mistral
base model, yeah.
Base model.
Yeah, so yeah. NV-Embed, we kind of teased to it before, is NVIDIA's proposal on how you can adapt generalist large language model, which has been pre-trained on basically the internet and some instructions on some normal language modeling tasks, and how to adapt that basically to work well as an embedding model. So what we usually had to in the past was encoder BERT-based models or T5-based models, which were fine-tuned on retrieval data. But now we see more and more these huge behemoth LLMs, which are decoder only, but still being used somehow as an encoder for text embeddings.
I was a bit surprised with NVIDIA coming with this paper because I haven't seen any work on IR or search from NVIDIA before.
Right, but I guess they put their own GPUs to good use because they also came up with a new architecture to exactly do this pooling where you take some token representations and then you form a text embedding for the overall inputs, which is a bit not straightforward to do with a decoder model. So what they propose is this new attention block on the output of the model, where you take the hidden representations and use self-attention to basically attend to each other and create one new representation of the overall inputs.
But on top of a pre-trained Mistral model, right? Yeah. Mistral 7B.
Yeah, but this is a replacement basically to mean pooling or end of sentence sequence that other models used before. And this is in combination with removing the causal attention. So effectively the model can see bidirectionally, which I think LLM2Vec also.
Bird-like, right? Yeah.
Also popularized. And then the cherry on top is basically just take all of the public data sets that MTAP has, the trade splits, and pass it through this huge model, train it for a bit using LoRa, and what you get is a model that performs best on MTAP, at least on its release.
Yeah, and they clocked in on the retrieval task at 59.36, but there's this other model from Link, a company we had also not heard from before, that topped that by going to 60 something. Yeah, so very nice development. But actually the NVIDIA paper has maybe a little bit more innovative aspects to how they did that. This is a very interesting paper which came out mid-May, the Platonic representation hypothesis. And basically the title refers to Plato's cave, where you have the not the real world, but the shadows of the real world on as representations of the real world on the walls of the cave. And what this paper argues is that as we train more and more powerful language models and vision models and multimodal models, they are actually kind of converging in terms of the representations that they build of the real world. Basically, how they measure that is through a kind of similarity metric that tries to assess the representational space of the model. And they do this using k-nearest neighbor. So they basically take a bunch of inputs and they look how close they are together in the latent space. And they do that for different models, and they compare the top k neighbor list of those. And then if they are highly overlapping, it means that at least in the local neighborhood, the representational space is very similar. And they show a couple of things. One is that with higher quality models, basically, like the better the models perform on downstream tasks, the more similar their internal representations are. And they also show that models that are trained on vision show a higher alignment with each other than language-only models. So interesting. Different models are all trying to arrive at a representation of reality, and that's because, of course, a good compression of reality is also a good predictor. So in that sense, not too surprising for the information theory enthusiasts among us. This is also about information theory, but from a different angle.
Yeah, and this is a surprising single author paper, which is still kind of
really
a work in progress.
I thought you had mistyped that.
So the idea here is kind of not exactly to tear down the chinchilla law, but to offer a new perspective on how things are measured. Basically, the premise is that scaling laws previously they were quite data independent. It is a trade-off between parameter count and data set size. But this paper proposes that not all data is equal. So you can take this into consideration when creating these
makes sense.
These laws.
I would guess that more interesting, higher entropy data is more informative than boring data, right?
Yeah, and actually what they found in this paper is that the GZIP, the classical compression algorithm, can be a pretty good predictor on how a data set can impact the scaling properties. So they do this in a control scenario where they generate synthetic data with pseudo, with a context-free grammar that with probabilities can change the syntactic complexity. Mm-hmm. And they come forward with new data-dependent scaling laws. As we can see in the plots, it's very hard to see here with the colors effect, but basically easier data sets with lower complexity, the models learn them faster. And on the other hand, more difficult, more complex language needs longer to train. And they have a kind of a real-world application on this, which is, for example, they find that code is pretty low complexity compared to natural language. So they find that data sets that used models that use the chinchilla law to train a code completion model, they kind of overtrained it. They could have achieved the same result. They compare with StarCoder, basically at a quarter less flops. And I think in this figure, they show that compared to chinchilla, basically they show on the top left, it's an easy data set, and on the bottom right is a difficult data set. Chinchilla is basically ignorant of that, but for them, it shows that an easier data set, you can more easily pack more parameters, but so the other one, you should train longer on the data set.
Yeah. So if you want to train a really good model, maybe start with the easier ones and then gzip all your common crawl blocks and then end with the ones which have a higher or a lower compression ratio. Number 5, does fine-tuning LLMs on new knowledge encourage hallucinations?
Yeah, I think this has been actively being discussed for a long while, but I think this is one of the few first works that studied this extensively. What they show basically, or the original premise, is that new knowledge introduced through fine-tuning that isn't contained in the pre-training encourages basically the model to make up stuff and be confident on things that it doesn't know in its internal knowledge. So by taking existing data sets and prompting the model probing it to see if it already knew the knowledge or not, depending on if it can complete the information correctly, they show that for data sets that the model already knew, then using those kind of doesn't allow it to overfit as easily. While if you just use data sets that contain unknown knowledge, after a while, as we can see in this figure on the
Which figure?
On the right one and the left one in the middle, this basically shows that the accuracy of the model is quite fast to grow on the easy data sets because it already knew them. And while for the other ones, it takes quite longer to learn the knowledge there. But after a while, if you keep training on this unknown data set to get a good performance of that as well, then the depth accuracy kind of drops, which shows that the model after a while, it just learns to predict stuff and not actually based on its knowledge. And they show that there are...
So it's unlearning in some sense, the pre-training knowledge.
Yeah, and they have a few tricks to get this to work more consistently. So to avoid this overfitting, you do the oldest trick in the book, which is early stopping based on the dev metric. And they also have an interesting finding, which is you don't have to only fine-tune with knowledge that it already had. You have to do it with data samples that have some degree of uncertainty. So not just reinforce what it already knew, but maybe things that you'd have to sample to get, or to have a bit of temperature to get the right answer. So these are the ones that contribute the most to the model's downstream performance.
All right, so number 6. This is not a fantastically surprising paper, but it's still kind of nice for those who still believe in neurosymbolic systems. So basically, what the authors here do in faithful logical reasoning via symbolic chain of thought is they extend the well-known chain of thought technique to let the model do a little bit of intermediate reasoning before it comes to an answer, to force it through various prompt engineering techniques to use a formalism like first-order logic or some kind of constraint satisfaction representation, and using that and forcing the model to basically first write down the problem in logical formulas and then kind of lay out the step of resolving deduction, and then actually solve the problem in that logical formalism, and then do another step of verification whether the solution was correct. They're able to quite significantly improve the performance of on a number of logical reasoning tasks. So there is hope for neurosymbolism, at least. Well, there's no really symbolic component except for in the notepad that the model itself is producing. Multimodal models.
Yeah, I'm not sure to what depth we can cover this, but I think it paves a very interesting direction for the future for models that are more natively multimodal. So this is a paper from Meta, which they attribute to the Chameleon team. So it's not a single author, it's in the new paradigm where everyone has contributed to it. And what's innovative about this model is that it performs early fusion of token-based multimodality. So basically, you treat every token as equal. You don't have separate tokens for text and vision, but it's all in the same embedding space. And then during generation, you can kind of use specific architectures to decode those models into either text or vision. And it seems to be quite a performant model. They compare it against open source models like Idefix and Lava 1.5, but they also do some regression tests against, for example, Gemini Pro or Mixed-Modal on text-only benchmarks.
And we have a runner-up, I think. Also, another multimodal model, which is very nice, is Zipper from Google DeepMind, which takes existing unimodal encoders and builds them into like a fusion model through cross-attention. A couple of papers which we're not going to have time to go into depth, but this is a pretty nice kind of detailed paper about positional encodings in transformers, which solves the counting problem where traditional position encodings like rope and others have trouble with multiple mentions of the same words. Contextual position encoding, or COPE. Well, in Austria, they don't believe in transformers, so they made a new kind of revival of LSTM, xLSTM. And they started a company around it called NXAI.
Yeah, which is just scale the LSTM as big as we can and do the modern tricks and a few architectural differences to see if we can match transformer performance, which they do to a large extent, but as always, you have to kind of choose your baselines carefully. But it's a very good approach, and I think people take inspiration from it.
Yeah, and a good paper. There's more to it, but we don't have time to cover that. And as a last, we want to shout out there's more alternatives to transformers than just the revival of the LSTM. State space models, of course, like Mamba, have been making some waves, and this is a very recent paper. Transformers are actually SSMs, where the sort of duality between transformer architecture and implementation is studied in great detail. I think of the 10, this is actually the best paper out there. It goes very deep into analysis of how state space models actually work and how they can be implemented efficiently on modern GPUs. It introduces the Mamba 2 architecture, and it shows empirically on a language modeling task that this actually works really well, better than vanilla transformers and better than Mamba 1. And with that, we come to the end with a closing thought. We still have the doomers. Jan LeCun has fought them back a little bit, but especially around the OpenAI drama, a lot of people are concerned about AI safety, and in fact, a number of anonymous and ex-OpenAI employees wrote this open letter, also co-signed by Benjo and Hinton and Stuart Russell, I think, to warn about the sort of mix of interests between big tech and AI safety. So there's that, check it out. But other people think AI apocalypse is actually when ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity go down all at the same time. It's a different view on reality. That's it. Thank you for attending. We have a couple of events coming up: SIGIR, Berlin Buzzwords, and Alice Summer School on Information Retrieval. For the local crowd, there's going to be a deep learning extravaganza in Lab 42 next week. And there's rumors that some very interesting fresh startups could be visiting Lab 42 in relation to TNW on June 20th. Keep you posted. And for Zeta Alpha, mark your calendar. Transformers at Work for this year is going to be on 20 September, but not necessarily here. We don't know yet.
Where that will be.
And the next edition of this Trends in AI monthly roundup is here on the campus in Science Park, 5th of July, again, traditionally live from Lab 42. Thank you and enjoy discovery.